Hello again. Welcome to Inspire the New. And this is number 2 video in the series After a While. In this part of the series, I'm sharing my personal testimony as the Lord has allowed me to, that I believe will encourage someone else on your journey as you endeavor to please God and to find your purpose in life and to discover what He has for you. Just want you to know that your suffering will not be always the same. You will not always be in the vein of suffering or being tried or being persecuted all the days of your life. But God has made some doors of escape, and after a while, after some whiles, He's going to show you the way out, or He will come and rescue you Himself. He will fight against your enemies for you because He has a purpose, a plan, and a destiny that must be fulfilled before your time on earth is ended. And some of us will get there before others. But nevertheless, if we are trusting in God, in one day's time, He can change your whole perspective, your whole destiny, your whole situation, and get you to that place where He wants you to be. So continue with my testimony. After the communist government in my country took over and were solidly in place and trying to practice their scientific socialism, having deceived the people, putting the word democratic before it, democratic socialism, because they knew that many of the people did not understand the difference, but that once they heard the word democratic, they would believe that it was something good. So that government got into place by a landslide victory, and began to reign a reign of terror on the nation. People from the opposition were arrested, put into a specially made court that they call the gun court, without due process and trial. And it was a time of great mourning and weeping and sorrow continually, and suffering and hardship and hopelessness in our country. Many of our people who could escaped with whatever they could take with them to Canada, to England, to France, to other islands of the Caribbean that would take them. And very soon, the country was brought to the state of bankruptcy. There was no investment coming in. The beautiful hotels were left rotting and decaying, falling into disrepair. Our people were suffering. The beautiful big regional Caribbean hospital was falling into disrepair with waters flowing from one floor to the other. And just mayhem and chaos, and people taking out of the hospital what they wanted for themselves, nothing left for the patient. You had to bring your own linen, your own whatever. It was a time of gross miscarriage of justice, suffering, hardship, and just Satan having a field day. Because this government has now set itself up as God. They were totally anti-God. They had deceived the people. Many had worshipped at their altar, and now they were having buyer's remorse. And they were finding out it was very difficult to move them from office. And so I realized, I knew in my spirit I had to go. It was very sorrowful for me even thinking about leaving my country, because I know my grandmother, she was alone. She had no one to help her. It was just us two girls. And my sister had gone astray and had found herself in a very difficult situation. And by this time, she had had maybe about 5 children, and she was still very young. I didn't want to leave my grandmother, because I just knew in my heart she would suffer. She had already been the victim of neighbors around her. She just had a small a quarter of a square chain of land that was given to her by her godmother, whom she, as a self-taught nurse and midwife, had helped to rescue this woman's soul and body from hell and pain by nursing her back to health after the woman was covered with bed sores. My grandmother had attended to her through the wisdom God gave her and used the right medicines and concoctions to bring this woman back to life. And the lady was so pleased. And so when my mother's parents turned her out of their house with a young child, she went to ask her godmother if she had a piece of land that she could sell her. And her godmother said, well, I don't have a piece to sell you, but I had this small half a square chain, or I'll give it to you. And she got her sons together and they walked around and they marked out the spot, put in the pegs, and the woman wrote the document that gave permission for my grandmother to have this piece of land. But several years later, after the woman was dead and gone, her godmother was dead and gone, the very sons who had agreed to this transaction, though they had all of around her, several acres, this is how the devil is. They determined that that one piece, that little half a square chain, was better than all that they had, and they needed to come and take it from an older widow woman. And so they started a campaign of harassment. Every day, somebody would come walk through the yard, the middle of our yard. They would knock over our basins, knock over our detergent, pick the fruits from the tree, let them fall in our basins and in our pans that we did washing. Came, brought their donkeys, tied on the fruit trees to destroy and what other people, because my grandmother was always giving away fruits and food and ground provision to anyone who stopped by who asked her for something. And they came and to show their authority, they let the animals feed what human beings could have benefited from. And they threatened to kill and they rushed on her in the kitchen. I remember one day one of the young sons, maybe he was about 20 odd at the time, 20 plus years old, rushed into the kitchen with a long piece of pipe in his hand. And he was jabbing at my grandmother because the beam was ahead so he couldn't hit her with it. And he was declaring, get out of our yard, get out of our property, get out. My grandmother had no defense, no one to help her. My sister jumped over the barrier in the door and she ran outside. She picked up a stone and she threw it at the man to get him away from there. And he turned before she could jump over the barrier to get back in the house. He hit her on the arm with this pipe and it turned discolored, black and blue as they would say. And his cap fell off in the house. And my grandmother, to journey downtown 5 miles, 7 miles away to make a report at the jail about it. And a case was filed. And then the judge told this young man, if you are brought back here one more time with a complaint that you harass this woman, it will be very difficult for you. I think he had to pay a fine. But we didn't benefit from any of that. We didn't see it. Maybe just to the courts. And they continued their campaign of harassment for a good part of 15, 20 years, even after I left. My grandmother would write and tell me, the war, the reign of terror. One of the persons who was a part of this family, a daughter-in-law, a wife of one of the sons. My grandmother delivered many of her children. She had quite a few. delivered her children at birth, single-handedly. Even then when they were in breech position, my grandmother knew what to do to get them turned around. And when the woman was in confinement with her newborn, my grandmother would take her goods to the market and sell it for her and bring the proceeds home so she could buy food and feed her family. And during this campaign of trying to take away this piece of land from my grandmother, that woman was one of the chief persons who joined in this fight to deprive her of the piece of land that her godmother had given her, legitimately so. And so after years, when I saw the situation with the government, the political situation getting worse, I knew I had to leave. I went downtown one day and I met one of my former high school classmates, and she told me that she was just coming back from Canada, home for the holidays, because she had gone there and gotten admitted into the university in Canada. And that just sparked an interest in my brain. I thought, oh my gosh, you can do that? But she had relatives there, and her family was wealthy, so she had a means of supporting herself there. And I didn't even think about the funds. I didn't think I had no one. I just knew I had to get out of there. And she told me how to apply. She told me the name of the university. And she told me how to apply. I applied. And then after some weeks, I got a response letter that I was accepted to the university in Canada. But then I didn't know what to do with the letter. And I didn't see my friend again. So I just kept the letter, thinking that there was another letter that would follow, that would tell me, give me direction what to do. However, no letter came. God would have it, I went downtown again, and I met one of my former classmates. She also had migrated and was going to school in Canada, and she said, oh, that letter, you should have taken it up to the Canadian Embassy a long time ago. And they are going to ask you for an affidavit of support, and you have to get permission from the Ministry of Education before you can study abroad. And so I said, oh my goodness. I rushed, gathered whatever documents they said I needed, and I went up to the capital city to try to get permission from the Canadian Embassy to study in Canada, and also the letter of permission from the Ministry of Education in my country. And the saga continues, but I hope that through this, sharing this testimony, you will be able to see the footprints and the hand of God providing, protecting, delivering, and trying to get me to this point of destiny where He's saying now, putting a demand on me, saying, it's time to enter into full-time ministry, to do what I called you to do. This is the after a while. You are in tune with Inspired Anew by God, God's princess. And I pray that this will inspire you to greater heights and to do the things that God has called you to do in this life, to make your mark on this world, to effectuate change in people's lives and in nations. Some of you are nation changers, destiny changers. You're only going to be able to accomplish those things as you draw close to God and do what He says you are to do. After a while, we'll return in a moment. God bless you.